What if I told you the most powerful relationship you will ever have is the one you build when you are completely alone? No noise, no hands to hold, just you and the silence that once terrified you. But in that silence, something awakens, something unshakable, something no one can take from you. This is not a story about heartbreak. This is a story about resurrection, about choosing peace over people, and finally discovering you were never meant to be saved by anyone but yourself. Stay with me till the end, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at love forever. It was 3 a.m. The clock ticked louder than it should. The walls breathed in silence, and the wind whispered secrets through the half-closed window. He sat on the edge of his bed, spine straight, eyes wide open, not from fear, not from pain, but from the calm realization that he was free. Free from the shouting, free from the endless justifications, free from the nights that ended in tears without explanation. He used to beg for love, used to shrink himself to be enough, used to walk on eggshells, smiling with a cracked soul. But now, he could breathe. The silence no longer scared him. It soothed him. He made coffee at midnight. He danced in the hallway wearing socks and no shame. He cried without hiding. He laughed without asking permission. No one rolled their eyes. No one gaslit his truth. The apartment was small, but every inch of it was his. Every dish in the sink belonged to him. Every mistake was his to own. There were no apologies forced into his throat. No blame games. No walking out in anger and slamming doors. One night, he remembered. That moment. The one that changed everything. He stood in the kitchen, hands trembling, heart pounding like thunder trapped in a chest. A plate had smashed against the wall. Not by accident. Her eyes were wild, her words sharper than broken glass. And in that moment, he saw it. Not love, not passion, but a prison. He was not a partner. He was a hostage in his own life. He left with nothing but a bag and his name. People said he gave up. They did not see the bruises on his soul. They did not hear the insults wrapped in kisses. They did not feel the cold that crept into bed every night, even with a body beside him. Living alone was not loneliness. It was recovery. It was self-respect. It was peace earned through fire. He learned to love the quiet, to trust his own voice, to stop explaining his worth, to sit across from himself and feel whole. The door was locked now, not to keep people out, but to keep his peace in. And sometimes, that is the bravest kind of love there is, the kind you give yourself, even when no one understands. He walked to the window, watching the city lights blink like distant stars, each one a life, each one a story, yet none of them were his burden to carry anymore. There was no one to pull him into a storm, no chaos masquerading as passion, no voice beside him telling him how to feel, how to speak, how to exist. For the first time in years, he did not second-guess his thoughts. He did not shrink to fit someone's version of love. He stood tall, even in solitude. The loneliness they warned him about, it never came. What came instead was clarity. He remembered waking up once, years ago, next to someone who called him selfish for needing space. He had rolled over, tears in his eyes, whispering apologies he never should have made. He learned then, love can suffocate too. It can wear your skin until you do not recognize yourself in the mirror. It can become a cage lined with velvet words and cold hands. Now, every morning, he woke up to sunlight spilling across his face. The air was still. The sheets were untouched. His mind, finally quiet. No more battles before breakfast. No more pretending. No more measuring his value by someone else's mood. He started reading again. He filled shelves with books instead of silence. He painted the walls with colors he liked, not negotiated tones of beige that matched someone else's taste. He learned to cook not to impress, but to nourish. He walked barefoot across the cold floor and felt every chill like a reminder. He was alive, fully, completely, unapologetically. There were nights he did cry. Memories are sharp, even when the present is soft. He missed the idea of love more than the person he shared it with. But even that ache felt cleaner now, not tangled in guilt or fear, just human. He smiled at strangers now, laughed with ease, The heavy armor he once wore. Gone. He did not have to be perfect anymore. He only had to be himself. One evening, while washing dishes, he caught his reflection in the kitchen window. He stared for a while, not in judgment, not in sorrow, but in awe. This was the face of survival, of someone who walked through fire and did not turn to ash. He made peace with the silence, with the echoes in empty rooms, because they no longer echoed with someone else's rage, only with his thoughts, his hopes, his dreams. He stopped looking at couples with envy. Not all connection is comfort. Not all love is safe. He learned that truth the hard way, and he was proud of that. He was proud of every time he said no, when it would have been easier to say yes, just to avoid a fight. He was proud of every lonely Friday night that built his strength brick by brick. He was proud of the way he started to love himself, in pieces at first, then all at once. People asked, "Do you not want someone?" He replied, "I want peace more." And they would not understand. But that was fine. Not everyone is meant to see your healing. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your freedom. He stopped dating, not because he gave up on love, but because he wanted the next time to be real, soft, safe. He was not afraid to be alone anymore. He was afraid of losing himself again. That fear kept him grounded. He built rituals. Morning coffee with no rush. Evening walks with no destination. Laughter with friends who did not expect him to perform. Music that stirred his soul, not someone else's memories. He spoke kindly to himself, held his own hand on hard days. He was not lonely. He was sacred, and in that sacred space, he found a kind of joy that no relationship had ever given him, because it was his, unfiltered, uninterrupted, uncontested, a joy that bloomed quietly but powerfully. It was in the way he opened windows after rain, in the way he stood barefoot in the grass, in the way he whispered, "I am enough," with no one around to hear. He had spent years convincing someone to love him. Now he spent minutes reminding himself that he was already lovable, already whole, already free. This was not a heartbreak story. This was a resurrection, a rebirth. And every quiet night in that little apartment was a celebration of everything he refused to settle for. He no longer chased closure. He no longer replayed conversations. He no longer wished things had turned out differently. They had turned out exactly as they should. Because now, he was not surviving. He was living, living alone, and living fully. Because sometimes, walking away from what is killing you is the loudest kind of love you can ever give yourself. And he chose that love. Every single day, he started planting things. Tiny green leaves in ceramic pots. Each leaf a promise. Each sprout a silent victory. They thrived under his care, growing quietly like his own soul. He named them, funny names, odd ones, because he could. There was no one to roll their eyes. No one to say, "That is stupid." He talked to them sometimes, not because he was lonely, but because his voice deserved to be heard, even if it echoed only off walls and windows. He lit candles at night, not for romance, for ritual. He liked the way the flame flickered, the way shadows danced without fear. There was power in small things. He learned that. A clean kitchen, fresh sheets, music that made his bones move, and long baths with no knocking at the door. He remembered the days when he could not even breathe without it becoming a crime. Now, every breath was a quiet rebellion, a gentle declaration that he would never again shrink for love, never again disappear to be held, never again lose himself just to say, "I am not alone." He was alone, and it was beautiful. He traveled solo. He sat in cafes with a book in one hand and peace in the other, watched sunsets from rooftops and drank wine slowly, tasting every note. He walked through art galleries and stared too long at pieces that made his chest ache. There was no rush, no one pulling his sleeve, saying, "Let's go." He stayed as long as he wanted, and when he left, he smiled, because freedom was not loud. It was subtle. It was in the choices no one else could see. He started writing again, not to be read, just to release. Poems, dreams, memories that no longer stung. He filled pages with truths he had buried for years, wrote letters he never sent, to people who would never understand. He no longer needed closure. He needed expression. And he gave that gift to himself. He lit incense and sat on the floor, legs crossed, eyes closed. Sometimes he cried, but not from pain, from relief, that he had finally come home, not to a place, but to himself. He looked through old photos once, saw a face that smiled but carried sorrow behind the eyes. He did not delete them. He did not hate who he was. He simply whispered, "You deserve better," and turned the page. Healing was not loud. It was not cinematic. It was quiet, like a sunrise that no one claps for, but still brings light. He stopped seeking validation, stopped asking if he was doing the right thing. He knew he was, because he could sleep. And sleeping peacefully, that was a miracle he never thought he would feel again. He forgave her, not because she apologized. She never did. But because he was tired of carrying the weight of what she broke. He forgave himself too, for staying, for hoping, for loving someone who did not know what love meant. That forgiveness did not come easy. It came with tears, with trembling hands, and a heart that still flinched at sudden noises. But it came, and when it did, the healing was deeper than he ever imagined. He stopped comparing his life to others, stopped scrolling through curated happiness, wondering where he went wrong. He knew now. Most people were running from themselves. He had stopped running. He had turned around and faced every ghost in the room. And he made peace with them. He started helping others. Not loudly. Quietly. A kind word. A gentle smile. Sometimes that was all someone needed to survive their own storm. He became a lighthouse without knowing it. A quiet presence that reminded people, it is okay to walk away. It is okay to start over. It is okay to be alone. Because alone does not mean broken. Alone does not mean empty. Alone means space. To breathe. To grow. To become. He had become. And he was still becoming. Every day, he was a little more himself. Not the version others created. Not the mask he used to wear. But the real him. Flawed. Strong. Soft. Unshakably whole. And one night, while lying in bed, the fan humming softly, moonlight pouring through the curtain, he whispered to the ceiling, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, but to life, to pain that taught him, to solitude that saved him, to love that once broke him, so he could rebuild from truth. He did not hate love. He honored it, but he honored himself more, because now he knew the most powerful relationship he would ever have was the one with his own soul. And nothing, no thrill, no kiss, no temporary comfort, was worth trading that away again. Not ever. In the stillness of that night, his eyes remained open, fixed on the dim ceiling above him, tracing the shifting shadows as if they were ancient constellations written just for him. He felt the weight of the world no longer crushing his chest, but simply resting beside him, present, yet no longer dominant. He had learned the rare art of carrying his own soul, not as a burden, but as a treasure. And though no one was there to witness this quiet transformation, he knew it was real. He had walked through heartbreak barefoot, through rooms echoing with words that had once cut him to the bone, and now those same rooms echoed with laughter, with music, with silence so soft it felt like being wrapped in a blanket of self-trust. There was no audience, no applause, just breath, just him, and that was enough. He remembered what it felt like to be in the middle of a conversation that was more like a war, where each word was a landmine, and love was something weaponized. He remembered the bitterness of being misunderstood, even while explaining himself 100 different ways. He remembered thinking that if he just tried harder, gave more, compromised further, the love would return, the warmth would come back. But it never did, because love that demands you vanish is not love. It is erasure. It is exile within your own life. He remembered that night he packed his things, how his fingers trembled not from fear, but from the unfamiliar taste of freedom. He had walked out the door with nothing but his name, and now that name was his again, not twisted, not belittled, not lost in the echo of someone else's rage. He had reclaimed it, letter by letter, moment by moment. He sat up in bed, ran his fingers through his hair, and smiled, because there was no one there to tell him it was too messy, or that he sighed too loudly, or that his stillness meant he was being cold. He no longer had to explain his silences. They were his sanctuary. He no longer had to prove his intentions. He lived in alignment now. No duplicity, no masks, no games played to keep temporary love from walking away. He learned to let go, not out of weakness, but out of respect for his own peace. He had built something sacred with his solitude, a kind of life that did not require decoration, a kind of joy that did not come from being seen, but from seeing himself clearly. He used to wonder if something was wrong with him, if he was too sensitive, too much, too quiet, too reflective. But he realized what made him different was what made him strong, and the ones who tried to silence those parts of him were not his people. He found peace in bookstores, in forests, in walks taken with no destination. He found joy in cooking meals slowly, stirring with intention, eating by candlelight, and washing dishes with gratitude. No distractions, no criticisms, only the rhythm of living life gently. He had stopped chasing what shimmered and started appreciating what stayed. And in that decision, his entire world shifted. He no longer longed for text messages that never came, no longer stared at his phone wondering if he had said too much or not enough. Now, when he said something, he meant it. And when he felt something, he honored it. He created space within himself that no one could invade, a space that felt like sunlight on cold skin, a space where his younger self would walk in and feel safe. That, he thought, was the real victory. Not just surviving what tried to break him, but creating a home within himself so stable, so honest, that he could never again be evicted from his own soul. He had turned loneliness into liberation. He had turned silence into symphony. He had turned abandonment into awakening. People still asked, "Do you not miss having someone?" And he would smile, not in arrogance, not in bitterness, but in peace. Because he did have someone. He had himself. The most loyal, most forgiving, most present version of love he had ever known. A love that never left. A love that listened. A love that stayed through every tear, every triumph, every restless night. He whispered softly, just before lying back down, "I did not lose them. I found me." And in the warmth of that realization, he exhaled the last traces of who he used to be. The people who left, the ones who hurt, the expectations that chained him, all of it gone. What remained was truth. What remained was freedom. And as the night deepened, he pulled the blanket over his shoulder, feeling the full weight of the peace he had fought for. He was not afraid of waking up alone. He was afraid of ever again waking up beside someone and still feeling alone. That was a fear he would never live again. Not after this. Not after choosing himself. Not after finally, beautifully, being whole. The next morning, light streamed in through the cracks of the blinds, casting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. He opened his eyes slowly, not to the sound of someone else's alarm, not to a groan or a sigh of resentment, but to the quiet hum of morning peace. The birds outside chirped like they had a message just for him. He stretched in bed, his limbs extending fully, unrestricted, unencumbered, free. There was no rush to check his phone, no weight pressing on his chest from an unresolved argument or a lingering silence filled with tension. He had no one to impress, no one to disappoint. The mirror did not judge him anymore. He looked into it and saw a face that had survived storms, a body that had carried pain and still stood, and eyes that no longer sought permission to shine. He stood in the kitchen barefoot, the cool tiles grounding him as he brewed his coffee. The scent of roasted beans filled the air, mingling with the faint notes of lavender from the candle he had left burning the night before. He poured the coffee slowly, deliberately, the way one pours gratitude into a cup. He sipped it in silence, not the awkward silence of strained companionship, but the sacred silence of self-acceptance. The kind of silence where thoughts do not race but glide gently, like leaves floating down a calm stream. He sat by the window, notebook in hand. He had started journaling again, not to fix himself, but to honor the journey. He wrote without filters, wrote truths he had once hidden, wrote dreams that had resurfaced after being buried under years of compromise. His handwriting, once tight and anxious, now flowed freely, like breath. He wrote about how he used to think he needed someone else to complete him, how he had believed that love meant endurance, even if it meant erasing parts of himself. He wrote about how wrong that was, about how now he felt whole in a way that no relationship had ever given him. He closed the notebook gently, as if placing a crown on something sacred. Then he stepped outside. The air was cool and kissed his skin with tenderness. Each breath felt new. He walked down the street, unhurried. He nodded at strangers, held doors open, smiled just because. There was no heaviness dragging behind him, no invisible leash pulling him back to a home that never felt like his. Now, everywhere he went, he brought his peace with him. It lived inside him. He found beauty in small things. The shimmer of dew on grass, the sound of a child laughing in the distance, the way the sun filtered through leaves, painting everything gold. He was present now, not trapped in memories, not shackled to the past. Just here, alive, awake, at ease. He sat on a park bench, watching people pass by, some in pairs, some in groups, some alone. He did not envy any of them, because for the first time, he did not feel like something was missing. He was not waiting for someone to show up and make his life begin. It had already begun. He had started living the day he chose himself, and he had not looked back. He saw love differently now, not as something to chase, but as something to share, and only when it felt safe, only when it felt honest. He knew that if love ever found him again, it would have to meet him where he stood, free, grounded, whole, not as a savior, not as a possession, but as a witness, a companion, someone who would walk beside him, not ahead or behind. But if love never came again, that would be fine too, because he had already found the one person who would never leave, himself. And he liked that man. He respected him. He knew what it cost to become him, and that made the quiet mornings, the slow days, the peaceful nights feel like gold. He stopped scrolling through social media looking for validation. He stopped measuring his worth against curated happiness. He no longer flinched when he saw couples laughing, no longer felt lesser for walking alone. He knew now, being alone and being lonely were not the same. He was alone, and it was powerful. He made decisions from a place of calm, not fear. He chose friendships that nurtured him, not ones that drained him. He spoke less but meant more. He loved deeper, but with boundaries. He no longer gave away pieces of himself, hoping someone would see his worth. He saw it. He honored it. He built routines that gave him joy. Sunrise walks, long baths, jazz music, home-cooked dinners eaten slowly. He became his own sanctuary. And in that sacred space, nothing felt missing. Not attention, not affection, not companionship. Because everything he had been searching for had always been waiting inside him. He had simply been too distracted, too bruised, too conditioned to look inward. But now he looked inward and saw light, saw strength, saw softness that no longer needed to be hidden. And on days when doubt crept in, when the old ache whispered that maybe he was too much or not enough, he simply closed his eyes, placed a hand on his heart, and whispered back, "I am already home. I am already whole. And nothing, no one, can take this from me again." He rose from the park bench as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long amber shadows on the pavement. There was no destination, no one waiting. And still, every step he took felt purposeful. His feet moved with grace, his spine tall, his chest open, not in defiance, but in quiet confidence. This was not the walk of someone escaping the past. It was the stride of someone who had faced it, forgiven it, and walked forward without dragging its weight behind. He passed familiar streets where memories used to sting, corners that once echoed with arguments, sidewalks that once carried footsteps of heartbreak. But the sting was gone now, not forgotten, just transformed. The pain had not vanished. It had simply lost its grip. He had outgrown it, like an old coat once worn in a storm, now folded and put away. He turned into a bookstore he had never entered before. The scent of old paper and ink hit him like a welcome. It felt like a temple. He wandered between shelves, fingers brushing spines of novels, poetry, philosophy. No one rushed him. No one judged his pace. He read blurbs aloud softly to himself, letting the words settle in his chest. A few titles made him laugh. Others made his eyes sting. He picked one and bought it, not because he needed it, but because it called to him. He had learned to listen to those quiet callings, the ones that made no noise but left echoes. He stepped outside, the sky now washed in pastel streaks. He did not need to post about it. He did not need to prove to the world that he was okay. His peace was not performance. It was presence, and that was more sacred than likes, more lasting than praise. He returned home to silence that welcomed him like an old friend. The apartment was not large, but every inch of it bore his signature, colors he loved, books he treasured, art that spoke to him. He did not decorate for guests. He decorated for his own soul. He lit a single lamp and made tea slowly, listening to the whistle as if it were music composed just for him. There were no distractions, no fake smiles, no cold shoulders, just warmth. He sat on the couch, tucked his legs under him, and opened the book. The first line pulled him in, but it was not just the words. It was the experience, the solitude, the permission to feel, to rest, to be. Once, he would have given up nights like this for the illusion of love. Once, he would have traded silence for the noise of companionship. Now, he protected this peace like something rare and holy. He was no longer lonely. He was alone, and that distinction changed everything. He remembered how he used to beg the universe for someone to come save him. He had stood on rooftops asking the stars for a love that would fill the holes in him. But the stars had been silent, not because they did not care, but because they knew what he needed was not someone else. What he needed was to become his own salvation. And he had, bit by bit, tear by tear, truth by brutal, beautiful truth. He learned to sit with pain until it softened, to name his fears until they stopped roaring, to cradle his wounds until they stopped bleeding. There was a time he thought he would never stop breaking. Now he was a mosaic, cracked in places, yes, but filled with gold, stronger not despite the breaking, but because of it. The tea cooled beside him as he lost himself in the pages, and when he finally closed the book, hours later, the room bathed in soft shadows. He felt it again, that fullness, that quiet, powerful knowing, that he was enough, that he had always been. He got ready for bed slowly, washed his face with care, brushed his teeth while humming an old melody, tied his hair back, turned off the lights, and slipped into cool sheets. He lay there, listening to the hum of the city outside his window, the occasional car, a distant dog barking. Life continued around him, but inside there was stillness. He thought about the people still out there, still searching, chasing things that glittered, compromising pieces of themselves for something that felt like love, but never truly was. He did not judge them. He had been them, and he hoped one day they would find this deep, still pool of self-trust, this gentle embrace of solitude, this freedom. He turned on his side, eyes growing heavy. The moon poured silver light across the floor like a blessing, and just before he drifted off, he whispered something only he could hear. A vow, a truth, a quiet promise etched into the fabric of who he had become. I will never abandon myself again. And so, as the world spins loud and fast, chasing validation, clinging to companionship, fearing the empty room, he walks another path, a quieter path, a braver one, the path of choosing himself. Because living alone is not loneliness. It is clarity. It is freedom. It is the art of becoming your own safe place, where your thoughts are not interrupted, where your heart is not questioned, where your worth is not conditional. Here, in the solitude he once feared, he discovered the deepest connection of all, a relationship not built on need, but on truth, not on fear of being alone, but on the joy of truly being. And in this stillness, in this sacred space that belongs only to him, he did not just learn how to live alone. He learned how to truly live.